just like me.
Holla ballers! What's going on? It's Preacher, and welcome to your Blood Death Knight guide, the class and spec that I actually rated as my most favored tank class currently in Legion. I love this thing. It plays so nicely in so many different scenarios, and with the recent rebalancing in 7.2.5, it looks like the Blood DK is actually going to be a pretty top tier tank. Having done today's the day kil'jaedon made his appearance and was tanked by double Blood DKs. I tanked some Tomb of Sergros as well. Don't you worry, you're going to have a good time on your Blood DK. So without further ado, let's get into how you're going to play this, and whether you're going to rock some Mythic Plus with it, whether you're going to do some normal dungeons, some world quests, or get into that top tier raiding. So let's take a look at our talents then. What I'm going to do is present to you a couple of builds and explain why they work, and then you can decide what's going to be best for you in each scenario, right? Because you might be doing, say, Mythic Plus, you might want to do a lot of damage, or you might be coming up against something with some seriously heavy damage like kil'jaedon, and you might need a lot more cooldown, so you might want to play more passively. The Blood DK has access to all of these choices, which makes it really cool. So if we start at level 56, I'm going to skim through these, but I want you to understand, what I really want you guys to walk away with after listening to this is being able to walk into any situation and choose the right talents for you without having to think, do I go with this build, do I go with that build, I better check a guide or something like that. This should be the only guide you ever need. So, Bloodworms, what do, right? They deal minor damage when they appear. Your auto attack crits have a chance to summon them. So what does that say to you straight away? Unreliable. They're unreliable. They may appear, they may not. Also gives more value to crit, which is nice if you're doing DPS, but nothing if you really want to go pure survivability. And they heal you for 50% of your missing health. That's also unreliable. You might not need it. If you drop below 50% health, your bloodworms will immediately burst and heal you. Firstly, 50% HP isn't that scary for a tank. It really isn't. So that kind of rules bloodworms out for those reasons. Heartbreaker, real simple. Are you going to be attacking 3 targets plus regularly? If so, Heartstrike generating more runic power, that's going to really pay off for you, right? Big time. Why? What's the crux of the Blood DK? Generating more resources so we can generate more mitigation. So if we're going to be cleaving a lot and doing lots of big pulls like in dungeons, Heartbreaker is going to be much more beneficial, more runic power, more defensives, and so on and so forth. But what if we can't? Then we could go down to Blood Drinker. On demand makes it reliable. Very different to the Bloodworms, right? Single target, gives a nice big health, very cheap, 30-second cooldown. Now it should all make sense. I understand. I hope now you can very clearly see how you would choose your talents, and we're going to use that process for the remainder of the talent section. So, rapid decomposition. Your Death and Decay deals damage 15% more often, and while you're in Death and Decay, we generate 1 runic power. Again, the same thing, generating more resources. And what do we know? The Blood DK has an ability called Crimson Scourge. Crimson Scourge means that our Death and Decay can be absolutely free, and we can keep it on cooldown even if we're single targeting. We have Death and Decay working absolutely all of the time, yeah? Very rarely will we run into a period where we don't have Death and Decay down, and the benefit is of Crimson Scourge, in nearly all occasions, it's also going to be absolutely free for us to cast. And by making it so we get all the extra runic power from it, that's going to be good times for us all, okay? Let's even get Crimson Scourge to fall. There it is. All right, there's Crimson Scourge. There it is. So that's completely free. Comes down, rapid decomposition, putting in work. But what about Heart of Ice? Heart of Ice is a new one. Heart of Ice is pretty cool. Death Strike extends the duration of Icebound Fortitude by 2 seconds. Very solid if you have to cover some major damage. So let's say, again, kil'jaedon, who is hammering you into the ground with his Fell Claws. You're going to be using your Icebound Fortitude in order to mitigate that. What we can do with Heart of Ice is extend it, get all that extra damage reduction for a few more seconds. But if you take this talent, guys, you want to have good Death Strikes ready. Having Heart of Ice and just popping Icebound Fortitude randomly, that's not going to pay off, right? I have no runic power right now, so if I pop Icebound Fortitude and I had full runes and I'm trying to get the benefit out of it, I get 1 Death Strike, 2 Death Strikes, and then it kind of like runs out at that point, yeah? I might get 1 extra out of it. So bear in mind that if you do take Heart of Ice, in order to take advantage of this talent, you're going to have to prepare to use it, right? You want to make sure you're aware of it and how to use it. Get a nice stack of runic power ready. Boom. Going into Icebound Fortitude, ready to do some big damage. Spectral Deflection, though. Attacks that deal more than 25% of your maximum health will consume additional bone shield charges to further reduce the damage. So this is okay. Rapid decomposition works all the time. These two work sometimes, right? Which is how you have to think about it. This one works all the time. These two work sometimes. How often is this going to happen to you? How hard is this thing going to hit? And also, what other talents have you taken? Sure, reducing additional damage with bone shield charges is pretty cool if you're getting hit so hard it's a quarter of your HP, right? That's pretty beefy. But what if you've taken a talent like Ossuary? We're going to get to Ossuary in a second, but I want you to bear that in mind when you're thinking about this. Again, time and a place. Think about what's happening to you. Are you going to get more benefit out of rapid decomposition, heart of ice, or spectral deflection? Ossuary. Ossuary is a very good talent. While you have at least 5 bone shield charges, the cost of Death Strike is reduced by 5 runic. In turn, that means that we have more runic to spend. Again, generating more resources. Additionally, your maximum runic power is increased by 10. This talent is just universally great, similar to the rapid decomposition. It's just always at work, but you have to bear in mind that you have to have 5 bone shield charges for it to be working. So where traditionally, you might be saying something like, well, I have at least 2 bone shield charges. It's doing its job. If you take Ossuary, no more. You need more than that in order for it to benefit. I need at least 5 to be getting the benefit of Ossuary. I need at least 5 to be gaining the benefit of Ossuary, otherwise I'm wasting my time. This talent isn't doing anything for me. So bear in mind if you take Ossuary that you need to change up your gameplay a little bit. Blood Tap. Blood Tap is again on demand and actually synergizes really well. So synergy between talents is a common thread in Legion. Picking this talent means you're going to pick another talent. So Blood Tap generally works well with Rune Tap that we'll get to soon. Blood Tap consumes Shadowy Essence, alright, it's got a 1-minute recharge, generates a rune. Maximum 2 charges, recharge time reduced by 2 seconds whenever a bone shield charge is consumed. So you're using a lot of bone shields and you need on-demand runes. That's the question. Remember, Ossuary is working all the time. Is there a scenario where I might need on-demand runes? That's the thought process. Well, again, bear that in mind when we talk about Rune Tap. Anti-magic barrier. Never really found a good use for this. I've tried it out a couple of times, been looking for places to use it. Anti-magic shell also increases your maximum HP by 25%. Now, if you combine that with other talents, maybe you can find some use for it. But the fact of the matter is, Ossuary is just all the time. Blood Tap is the on-demand if you need it. Anti-magic barrier, if you have to soak something that is super hard-hitting, right? So there have been occasions in the past, and I'm thinking way back to like Cataclysm here with the tentacles on Deathwing. I mean, that's how specific I'm thinking. Where you had to soak an enormous hit, then that might come in handy. Right now, I'm not aware of anything in the game where that's the case that you wouldn't want to take Ossuary or Blood Tap over that, okay? Mark of Blood gives us a new cooldown. Place a Mark of Blood on an enemy for 25 seconds. The enemy's damaging auto attacks will also heal their victim for 3% of the victim's maximum health. Right. 1, this costs 30 runic power. That's pretty expensive in our day and age, especially if you've got something like Ossuary. It only works on the target's auto attacks. So we have to ask, how often am I being hit by auto attacks? So if something hits really, really slow, you're going to get less benefit out of this, like a lot less benefit. And how often things and how fast things hit you is a big part of knowing what talents to take as a tank, especially when it comes to abilities like this. So that's something you ought to bear in mind, is how much use am I actually going to get out of this, especially in comparison to Red Thirst. Spending runic power, of which, if we have things like Heartbreaker, Rapid Decomposition, and Ossuary, we have a lot more of than normal, will decrease the remaining cooldown of Vampiric Blood by 1 second per 6. Bearing in mind how much we spend of runic power, this works tremendously well. I want you to bear in mind things like Spectral Deflection and Anti-Magic Barrier, right, that have these slight bonuses, and then compare it to something like Vampiric Blood, which embraces your undeath and increases your maximum health by 45%, right? Huge buff. And increases all healing and absorbs received by 45%. That includes heals on you. It is one of the best tanking cooldowns in the goddamn game, and you can get that cooldown down massively with Red Thirst. So bear that in mind. It's fucking awesome and works really well with the other talents. But what if I want yet another cooldown for a specific moment? Tombstone. Tombstone. Consume up to 5 bone shield charges for each charge consumed. You gain 6 runic power and absorb damage equal to 6% of your maximum HP. Another pretty big goddamn absorb. Now, it does suck away runic power into something that isn't Death Strike. It has a 1-minute cooldown, and it's going to eat your bone shields. That's a lot of cost. It's expensive for what it does. No real scenario that really pays off, but if you find yourself in need of yet another cooldown that isn't going to pay off like Mark of Bloodwill because you get attacked very slowly, then Tombstone is there should you need it. Generally speaking, though, it's all about that Red Thirst. I would rather have more Vampiric Bloods than a Tombstone, in my opinion. Level 75, Tightening Grasp. So you might not know, but the reason the Blood DK is really shining in some people's eyes is because of that sweet, sweet Gorfiend's Grasp, that AoE grip, and good God, is it good, and you should be making maximum use of it at all possible opportunities. Oh, it's good. So if you're doing a lot of dungeons and stuff, you might want to take Tightening Grasp, or if you have something in a raid that requires a lot of AoE grip, think about it. If you're doing Mythic Plus and stuff, though, I tend to prefer Tremble Goddamn Before Me, because this thing is fucking cool, and always has been. Enemies damaged by your Death and Decay, of which you now know we have down all the time, and have a chance to cower in place for 3 seconds, but cannot suffer from this effect for more than once every 10 seconds. Making them big pulls, scariest foot to other tanks, and just notice how you can cut, sometimes, the entire pack in half with Tremble Before Me of mobs that are actually damaging you. And the best thing about this, a big problem with AoE stuns that tanks run into, and you might not know this, is that once you stun everything, they all come out of the stun at the same time, and they all attack you at exactly the same time. This makes damage taken very spiky, something we don't really like. Tremble Before Me is a chance to proc randomly on various mobs, and therefore continues to stagger the attacks you get. It's so cool and so useful, and you will notice massive less damage taken when you take Tremble Before Me, compared to if you don't. March of the Damned, though. Wraithwalk lasts 100% longer and breaks stun, stare, and root effects. Now, mobility is bad. Let's fucking talk about it. Let's lay it down. Mobility be bad. It's bad for the DK. 100% extra Wraithwalk ain't really going to get it done, right? If you do need Wraithwalk for something, look, it actually covers a decent distance. It really does cover a decent distance. That should be more than enough for most scenarios. This does not reduce the cooldown of Wraithwalk, so 100% extra Wraithwalk ain't really beneficial. However, it does break, stun, snare, and root effects when cast. This can be extremely powerful. So I don't want you to look at March of the Damned and go, fuck off, dude. I want you to think about the fact that it does break stun, snares, and root effects, okay? Those can be very, very problematic for tanks, and if you could break that with Wraithwalk, that's pretty chill. Let's go down. Level 90. Wielded Necropolis. Damage taken below 35% health is reduced by 35%. On paper, this should be a really good talent. Practicality-wise, not so much, unless you're in a very specific scenario. The reason for that is healers aren't going to leave you at below 35% health for a very long period of time, if at all possible, right? They're not going to do that, which means the value of the talent is quickly diminished. It's nice that it reduces that damage. Maybe it'll stop a fatal blow, potentially, but the fact of the matter is, if you're getting that low, the healers are going to be like, dude, no. If you're soloing stuff, you might find more benefit here, but generally speaking, that sounds better than it actually is. Just watch out for specific scenarios. There have been some raid bosses on occasion that have reduced everybody to a very, very low HP and kept them there, in which case, if that talent was working all the time, it would be pretty cool. Nothing in game like that right now, as far as I'm aware. Foul Bulwark, though. Each charge of Bone Shield increases your maximum health by 2%. Here's the synergy. So with Ossuary, we know we're keeping above 5 anyway, right? Now Foul Bulwark is going to work well with this, because having all the extra Bone Shields is increasing my HP naturally. I'm already, because of Ossuary, keeping above 5. Therefore, I'm getting at least 10%, right? So it's a wonderful, wonderful talent that synergizes really well. And once again, like several choices here, just works all the time. But again, if you want some big, big cooldowns, do not rule out Rune Tap, because Rune Tap reduces damage taken by 40%. That's huge for 3 seconds. So it's very, very tiny timing, but that's all you need. Most things that hit you extremely hard have a very, very solid cast time or a swing or something like that, where you'll see other tanks fall down. You can pop a Rune Tap, and in that 3-second window, you can laugh at that ability. 1 rune, 25-second recharge, mix that with Blood Tap. What do we got? We've got an on-demand Rune Tap. If we fuck up our rune control or screw anything up, then we've got Rune Tap available and ready to go for them scary, scary moments. So bear in mind, do I want a constant, greater amount of HP, which plays well into all my other talents? Or does that not matter? Does that pale in comparison to the fact that I'm going to get hit for 12 million damage or something stupid, right? And I need to be able to reduce that damage. Again, knowing what to pick and when is a good idea. Level 100, Bone Storm, similar to Will of Necropolis. God, I wish this talent was better than it actually is. If you're doing raw damage, sure. If you are so geared that you will never die, which can happen very quickly in the Blood DK and a lot of casual content, then sure, go ahead and Bone Storm. Practicality-wise, though, nah. Practicality-wise, it doesn't work half as well as we want outside of just doing damage. It's a very offensive spell. It's going to chunk all your runic power away, which, as we know, is the bones are made up of being a DK tank. It does decent damage. It also heals you for the damage it does. Again, if you're soloing, you might find this more useful. But generally speaking, the most dangerous things in this game occur after the mobs die. So that will be things like bursting, for example. And that only happens after things have died, where Bone Storm is not going to pay off. So that part of it actually makes it a very, very useless talent. And you won't even see, despite how cool it is, a lot of DKs taking this. So just understand how it works. Purgatory, though, can be the godsend. An unholy pact that prevents fatal damage. Instead, absorbing the incoming healing equals the damage prevented for 3 seconds. If any healing absorption remains when this effect expires, you will die. This effect may only occur once every 4 minutes. There are some things that just kill you sometimes. That's the life of being a tank, unfortunately. And Purgatory is just that safety net. It's an absolute safety net. A healer might be slacking on a healer for 1 or 2 milliseconds, and suddenly you're dead. That can happen, especially as you get higher up in raiding. When you're progress raiding and your healers aren't sure exactly what's going to happen or how hard things are going to hit, Purgatory can save your goddamn ass. It's an absolute safety net that'll come in handy just when you least expect it. And you'll be like, oh, fuck. Every time, Purgatory you might not see for a week. And then suddenly you're like, thank God I had Purgatory. It's so cool to have for that. And that's why I take it. Sometimes we end up in those scenarios and we're like, oh God, okay, now I'm Purgatory. That's fantastic. Blood Mirror. If you want yet another cooldown. Afflict an enemy with a Blood Mirror for 10 seconds while active. 20% of the damage dealt to you is redirected to the target. Yes, another cooldown, another 20% damage reduction. 2-minute cooldown, adding up to yet more big defensive cooldowns. 20%, it's okay. But the fact is, it's another big cooldown that you can use, making Blood DKs very reminiscent of Wrath of the Lich King when they were the DK. So those are your talents, and you should now be very easily able to pick what you want to do based on the content you do. So this would be my dungeon go-to, right? Mythic Plus, decent damage, all passive, dealing with all different kinds of scenarios. Very simple to play. Doesn't change up my gameplay at all. Very, very easy. But what if I'm going to progress tank and I'm going to have to deal with some huge, enormous burst windows of damage? I could go like, I'm dealing with one boss or something like that. I'm going to go boom, I'm going to go boom, I'm going to go boom, and I'm going to go boom. And I might take March of the Damned or Tanning Grass, depending on what I'm going to use. And I might also take Mark of Blood. I might take Red Thirst. I now have access to 1 extra cooldown, 2 extra cooldowns, 3 extra cooldowns, 4 extra cooldowns. 4 extra major cooldowns. I can now prevent damage. I can self-heal on demand. 40% damage reduction. 20% damage redirected. Blood tap. Extra runes on demand should I need it. I can now Heart of Ice alongside with this. And I can pair up my Icebound Fortitude to last a long time. I've now just become a tank that could withstand huge, enormous, bursty hits from a hard-hitting boss without question. But oh shit, now it's time for trash. And I can just go boom, 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 boom. And now I'm ready to go. That is your Blood DK. Those are your 2 very common builds, guys. Those are your talents. So now you know what you're going to spec into. How do we play this bad boy? Well, it's pretty simple, actually. We covered most of it going in. The big part of the gameplay, of course, is going to be using your Blood Boil. That's going to put the diseases on the target, right? Diseases very, very crucial in order to maintain your DPS and drain health from the target. You can see your diseases drain health from the target every 3 seconds, right? Worthwhile getting those diseases up. Not only that, it's your snap AoE button. So mobs are running in, you're jumping into a new pack, boom, dropping that Blood Boil. And Blood Boil is absolutely free. It has a very short 6-second recharge. So you're going to be weaving Blood Boils into your gameplay. And you want to be doing that because otherwise you're just going to be coming down to pressing Marrow Rend and Death Strike and Heart Strike. And that's about it. And it's not that fun. What you're going to be doing next is deciding, do I want Bone Shield charges? You're going to ask yourself these questions. Is diseases up? Yes, no. I'm going to use Blood Boil, or you're going to use Death's Caress to put it on a single target if you want to, but that costs a rune. Blood Boil's free. You do the math. Then you're going to ask, do I want some Bone Shield charges? If so, you're going to spend runes on Marrow Rend to get some Bone Shield charges. You're also going to be tracking it in some way. You can see the way I track my Bone Shield charges. You can also see that a timer is spinning around. And that means that if I need to refresh them, I can see it coming on. Oh, it's halfway through. Maybe I should refresh. And that's how we're going to do that. And also tracking Crimson Scourge, so we can throw down them Death and Decays. So your basic gameplay is going to be keeping diseases up, using Death and Decay whenever you have the proc, and keeping your Bone Shield charges up by Marrow Rend. Now, what if I haven't capped out runic power and I haven't taken a lot of damage, so I don't need to Death Strike and I don't need any Bone Shield charges? That's where you're going to use your Heart Strike, yeah? Now, depending on the talents you spec into, this is either going to hit 3 targets or it's going to hit a couple. And that's going to generate you more runic power because it only costs 1 rune, right? It only costs 1 rune to Heart Strike, Marrow Rend costs 2. So in all opportunities where you're not having to refresh Bone Shield charges, you're going to be using Heart Strike instead to get more runic power out of it. That's what you're going to be doing with your gameplay. On top of that, you're going to be keeping an eye on that runic power and then healing yourself whenever necessary, yeah? You're going to be keeping yourself nice and topped up, keep these resources going, mixing in blood boils, right? Don't be somebody who, like, hangs on to blood boil. It's not worthwhile. It refreshes so fast that you can use it from pack to pack. And you see I'm watching here. Oh, it's down to 5 charges. Gonna top myself up with some more Marrow Rends and just keep going as normal. Now, getting better at this spec is going to be managing this rune regeneration. You want to make sure that you're not running out of runes, because if you run out of runes, if you do get a tricky scenario, like you've run out of bone shields or you forgot to refresh it, something like that, you've got nothing to top it up. Especially if you have things like rune tap, where you need it in an emergency scenario, you're going to need some runes to sit on. I like to sit on 2 runes, generally speaking, and keep the flow like this. Now, you can probably already tell why this spec flows like I say it does. Look how much stuff you get to do. Although Blood Boil is kind of boring, because it's totally free, its effect is not boring, and it's well worth doing because it means diseases are always taken care of. If I want to jump into another pack, I can. I have Death and Decay as an option. I have Blood Boil. Oh, I need to go over here now. I can go just tank these, right? And you just keep it going. On top of that, in terms of general gameplay, those are going to be your 5 main buttons, is going to be Consumption. Now, Consumption is our artifact ability. How do we use this? You'd like to think this is a defensive ability, 45-second cooldowns. And sometimes it is, but most of the time, not. Most of the time, you're going to use it for its damage, which is kind of unfortunate. Consumption strikes all the enemies in front of you, so it does a big dick cleave, right? A real big swathe of cleave into the mobs. Wonderful for AoE tanking, huge amounts of damage. And it heals of you for 100% of that damage done. But it's a kind of on-demand heal. If you're doing some really scary AoE and you want it as like an emergency, it's going to prop you up once, but that health is going to quickly disappear again because it doesn't really benefit you too much. That's why most DKs recommend you use it offensively rather than defensively, but that's going to come down to your choice, right? If you watch me play a Blood DK, you'll often see me just chilling with Consumption. If I'm not too worried about damage, like I'm not in a super rush, I'm more than happy to do a bit more dangerous pulls and keep Consumption ready for when I need it, right? On top of that, we've already mentioned Vampiric Blood and its effects. Icebound Fortitude, which is going to be a flat 30% damage reduction for when you use it. We also have Dancing Rune Weapon, right? Dancing Rune Weapon is a decent enough defensive cooldown. When active, you gain 40% parry chance. It's very decent. Again, a 3-minute cooldown, what it does isn't that impressive. What it does do, though, is huge damage boost. Now, depending on the style of play, some tanks are all defense, and I get that, because I play that way. Yes, I do. But damage is nothing to be ignored, and when you can do such a huge damage boost like you can with Dancing Rune Weapon, using it offensively can often be the right choice. So when you pop Dancing Rune Weapon and do things like diseases, you can see we get triple diseases. All your spells are going to start hitting 3 times, including Consumption. It gives you massive amounts of extra damage, right? It's not something that could be ignored for its offensive utility, and that's something you really need to bear in mind. You'll notice that 1 Marrow Rend there gave me 10 Bone Shield charges, yeah? All 3 of them hit at once. Very, very cool spell. Very cool spell. Wished it lasted a little bit longer, but that's the way it is. That's the way it's going to go on there. We also have Anti-Magic Shell. Anti-Magic Shell is a good use of Anti-Magic Shell. Really separates the good blood tanks from the bad ones. Being able to surround yourself in something that prevents 2.4 million magic damage and prevents the application of harmful magical effects is incredible. And good tanks will be utilizing this to the absolute maximum, either by maintaining the position of a boss without having to run away from magical damage, or just being able to multiple times soak things because you're not going to be affected by the harmful effects it does. Often, if something affects you magically, it also puts a damaging spell on you that'll keep ticking down on you. And you can prevent that with preemptive use of Anti-Magic Shell. And that's something you really need to bear in mind. Other than that, the big things you need to be aware of course, Death Grip. Try and use Death Grip as often as possible to create death balls. I talk about that in the tanking series. You can see link down below. On that, your gameplay is pretty straightforward with the Blood DK. It's very smooth, it's very fast, it's very reactive. Keep those bone shields ticking, right? Your AoE stuff is pretty much the same as your normal standard stuff. You have things like Death and Decay. There's the Crimson Scourge. Throw it down. Keep those bone shields ticking away, yeah? Keep the blood boils ticking. And there, my friends, is the Blood DK. I love this thing. In any form of dungeon playtime, it is absolutely fantastic. I adore it. There's no real advanced options with this either. It's all the most advanced thing you're going to be doing in the Blood DK is managing runes and runic power and bone shield charges. You're spinning those plates. It's not difficult to do, but making sure you're always ready in any scenario. As with anything to do with tanking, it's all about knowing what's coming next and how are you going to deal with it. That's going to come from general tanking, and the Blood DK excels at that. In terms of any mods I'd recommend for the Blood DK, I showed you tracking some things. That's from Tell Me When. You could download that from my UI pack. Alternatively, a lot of people like to use weak auras, although it's not something I use. I prefer Tell Me When from its, well, it's the one I've used forever. It's the one I've used forever, and I've found no reason to switch over, although that's something people could debate with. Other than that, just make sure you're able to nice and easily track things like bone shields. Whatever mod you decide to use, that's what I recommend. Other than that, the general UI that I have that shows runes and stuff is just Elf UI, which you can all download for free as well, and I totally recommend it. Keep your islands up to date. Thank you so much for listening to the Blood DK guide. I'll see you again. Bye bye, guys.